drove them to protect all these other Jews when they even didn't know about their own security? What was in them to do this?
It was like a message from Rebbeinu Shalom. They should try and save the Jews of Novogrudek, as all of them will be killed. And the decision was a correct one. They've made a decision, and immediately a message came out to Novogrudek, to the ghetto and to the camp, that if you escape, you can go to kilometer 14 from Novogrudek to Lida, and there will be a man called Kozlovsky, and he will direct you where to find the Belskis. Now, the second massacre, which I told you about, which took place in 1942, there was a farmer, very, very poor farmer at Pole, by the name of Bobrovsky, and he watched the German killing the 5,000 Jews. His house was very high above. He was a religious man, and he immediately sent his son to meet the Belskis, which he knew where they were, because in which area, and he said, I am willing to risk my life. If people, Jews, are escaping, you can direct them to my place.
He was a religious Christian.
He was a religious Christian.
Yeah.
And in 1942, when I escaped the first time, I ran to this man. And his wife, she brought me, she didn't let me into the house. It was a very cold night. And she brought me a hot plate of soup, which in fact, she saved my life. There were 14 people. And the 12, two of us went back to the camp for a different reason. The 12, they said, you wait for 2 nights in the little forest. My son will go to a village and notify the Belskis that they got customers here for them. And so he did, and these people have joined. And by 1942, late 42, he had already 300 people moving from one place to another, ambushing the Germans and making cooperation, which I don't know how many people you have seen Defiance, being in cooperation with the Russian partisans, and together they used to go on ambushing the Germans. Now, if I may just, and then we'll go back. When they wanted to escape from the camp, when they made 100 meters, and the Germans have cut the wheat, would they have escaped at that time? None of us would remain alive. Because not knowing to us, the Germans have brought 52,000 soldiers in Novogrudek and surrounding area to combat the partisans. If they would have escaped, we would have been right in the center of the German army. And the Germans, they went on to Naliboki to fight the partisans. Belsky, with some great luck, managed through a person who knew the forest very well, moved to an area, to a swamp area, which is called Krasnaya Gorka, a little red mountain, as they called it. And there, also 900 people by that time were there, and artillery was shooting over the head, but they all saved. Not one person was lost. And that was how I survived during the big ambush from the Germans.
One of the key things you were telling me when we were preparing for this was that one of the reasons why you survived, even though the Germans knew where you were the whole time, was that even at this time, their power was compromised. Can you explain
yes.
the background to that?
When the Soviet collapsed in 1991, I decided for the first time to go back to Novogrudek, and the most important thing, to search for documents. What happened? After all, the Germans registered everything, and so did the Russians. And I've managed to compile a very big lot of documents. And one of the documents, which is in my book, it tells you that they've managed to capture a partisan, a Russian partisan, and he gave them exactly where the Belskis are, exactly where they're located. The document arrived too late. The letter arrived too late to the German High Command. But when the Germans have brought in 52,000 soldiers to combat the partisans, the Russians have opened up a very big offensive in Velikie Luki, which I don't know how many people know. Velikie Luki, it's a very famous battle. The Germans had no option but to take the 52,000 SS soldiers and move to Velikie Luki. And that was the last big operation against the partisans. From then on, there was no big operations. The Germans brought 6,000 Cossacks into Novogrudek, Cossacks who cooperated with the Germans. They brought Ragula, which was a terrible man. They later found out that he's in Canada, and they tried to send him back to Russia, but it didn't work. He formed a group called Ragulovci, after his name, purely fighting the partisans. But another enemy came on our line, the Poles, white Poles. And the Poles came out with a slogan, Poland without Jews and communists. So we had another enemy on our doorstep. But when I arrived, there was already a very strong high command, and we moved to a place called Naliboki, which was a forest 40 miles by 40 miles. You can imagine the size of it. And we built a little shtetl there. We had workshops. We had everything what you can think of. Because to the Russian partisans, if he had wheat, what will he do with it? So he used to bring it to Belsky. We had a mill, we had a bakery. So it got bread for it. He had a cow, what will he do with a cow? They are moving about continuously. So he brought it to Belsky. Belsky used to give him sausages because we had a sausage factory. They were dirty, they wanted to wash. Belsky had a soap factory from the bones, they made soap. We had a tannery. The people from Kodlichevo who escaped, they were expert tanners. So the skin was made into leather. They made shoes. They were shoemakers. We had lots of partisans being dropped by parachute. From the parachute, they made underwear for the Russian High Command. It was silk underwear. Whatever you will think of, it was made in Belsky. For that, he got paid, of course, with food. We had an airport, which was in 1943, which was not very far away, that there were lots of casualties. And the Russians had to make arrangements to take the casualties back to Russia. So the planes used to land. Who is a better way? Belsky has arranged to guard them. For a month, he guarded the airport. For that, he used to meet the pilots. The pilots, he used to give them sausages, they used to give him modern weapons. And so it went on up to the liberation.
So this was